this is a tree problem. We want to use DFS with recursion to solve it. So for each subtree, we want to encode it into a tuple structure. So let's define also for each subtree, we create a unique ID for the subtree, and we save it into a map. Okay, so for the conversion between tree and tuple, we do that in the DFS. So let's first, in the main method, we want to go through the root and return answer. So for the answer, it is going to be a vector of tree nodes. And we're going to make a map. This map has the tuple as the key and integer as the value. So for this, we just call it the tree ID because it maps tree to an ID. Then we also need to use another map to map the ID with the frequency of how many times the ID appears. So we call this count. And we also want to maintain unique ID, and we let it equal to 0 at the time at the beginning. So for this, we now write the DFS function. It's going to take the root as the input parameter. If it is null, I want to return -1. And next, we want to make a tuple. So this is a current tree called current tree equals make tuple. So in here we have the root, we have we use the DFS to find the left tree ID and do the same thing for the right tree. Okay, after that, we want to check if it has this current tree already. If it doesn't, then we have this added into the map and assign it with a UID. After that, we want to increase the UID by 1. Okay, then we want to get the current ID and add it into the count map. And if this ID has appeared twice, then we add it into the add this current node into the answer. And finally, we want to return the current ID. Okay, so let's review the code. We define the answer we define a map. Notice this is map. It's not an unordered map. A tree ID to save the tuple to ID UID relationship. Then we define a count map to save the ID to its frequency. And then define a UID, give it an initial value of 0. Then the DFS function, if root is null, return -1. Get the current tree as a tuple from the root value, the left value, and the right value. And by the way, so the root value is really a value of the root, but the left and right are the IDs. Then if we don't have the current tree in the tree map, we want to add it to the tree map and give it a UID. And then we increase the UID by 1. The current ID is just the ID of the current tree node, of the current tree. Then we increase the count by 1. And if we have 2 of the current ID numbers in the count map, we add it into the answer. And finally, we return the current ID. In the main function, we call the root function. So we call the DFS with the root node and return the answer. Okay, let's give it a try. Okay. Answer dot pushback root. Okay, I should have used root here. Try one more time. Correct. One more test cases. And submit. Okay, that is right. And another method is to use a string. To use string as the DFS method. Let's try that. So we're going to have string DFS. So here we have the node as input. Again, if node equals null, return a pound sign. Then finally we want to return the string value of the node's value plus DFS node's left value and DFS node right value. Okay, so before we do that, let's define this as the current node. And again, here we want to define a map. Of string with integer. So this is, we call it count. And we also want to define the answer as the global parameter. Okay, so define a cur, then we want to add that to the count map, and if this has appeared twice, we want to add that into the answer. We want to add the node into the answer, and finally we're going to return the cur string. And in the main method, we call DFS and return answer. Here we don't have the UID, just directly, let's review them. The code directly, we create a string node called cur using this recursion. So for each subtree, it has a unique string, and we use a count map to track how many times it has appeared in the tree node. If there are 2 times, we save the node into the answer. Okay, let's run the test case. That's correct. One more test case and submit. Okay, accepted.